What's your full name?
Roy Stevens, Stevens.
And your date of birth?
It was November 1, 1924.
Okay, where were you born?
Well, I was born in Carter County, Kentucky, in an unincorporated little village called Grahn, Grahn. And it had that name because the fellow that came there and discovered there was a lot of fire clay started making refractories brick. So he owned the whole place, so they named it for him.
Okay. Not a big town.
No, it was long. It's about a mile long, but about maybe 100 yards wide. Between the hills, there was a creek, a railroad, a road, and then a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family. How many kids?
Okay. I was one of four, and I was the third one. I had older brother who served in the United States Army as an officer during World War II, and my sister who was older than I, and she passed away with cancer when she was 62. And then me, and I have a younger sister who still lives. She's in San Antonio, Texas. Her husband was an Air Force navigator during the Korean War. And so they were looking for a place to live where there was adequate military medical facilities. Mm-hmm. And they was looking for some sort of a business. They had 3 sons, and they bought 2 Baskin-Robbins ice cream stores, put those sons to work, put their way through college that way, then they sold the stores.
Not a bad way to do it.
Smart doing that.
Yeah. And I think you had told me you moved away from there. When did you move and where to?
Well, I left there when I went to the Navy. I was 18, and I never lived back there other than to visit with my parents. I got out of the Navy and went to the university and spent some time there, so I never lived back there. I moved when we finished college, I believe with a master's degree at the time. We went to Delta State College in Mississippi to fill in a term for a guy that was on leave, and knowing that I would be there only through the summer of 1950. And then I took a job at what is now UNA, University of North Alabama, and couldn't get up enough money to leave, so I stayed 40 years.
What was it called at that time when you first started?
Florence State Teachers College.
Okay.
And it had a name change to Florence State College, and then to Florence State University, and then to the University of North Alabama. And that last change came about like 1974 would be close.
So, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted. I would have been drafted. And the Navy suggested that I might get into this, air program, and I thought that would be better than being in the Army, so I enlisted.
Yeah. Can you kind of walk me through where you started and trained and then ended up?
Okay. I'll give you, I went to Great Lake, Illinois, to boot camp, which most people from that part of the world did go. And I finished there, and they give you a battery of tests and so forth. And they suggested that I probably ought to go to flight school, but they weren't taking anyone other than college graduates at the time. And so I went to Navy Aviation Radio School. The big thing there was learning international Morse code, and that washed a lot of people out. They just couldn't do it. Couldn't listen to that. And so you had to have certain proficiency, and after the first 2 weeks, you were sort of on your own as to how fast you would go. You could take a test to see whether you could send and receive to their specifications. When you did that, over, about 3 times, then they sent you on, and so I left there and went to Hollywood, Florida, to Aerial Gunnery School. From there, I went to Fort Lauderdale in what the Navy called operational training, where they matched you with a combat airplane. And so I trained with a Marine major flying TBFs at the time, and so when I finished that and got my wings, they matched me up with a pilot, and we did some more training at Fort Lauderdale, and then we went to San Diego, North Island Naval Air Station, San Diego, and we traveled on individual orders by train. Took me 7 days to get from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to San Diego, California. And somehow I found the Naval Air Station on Coronado Island. They called it North Island Naval Air Station. And the pilot showed up there, and then they assigned us to a squadron, VC-97, which had formed in Seattle. And they came down to San Diego a couple weeks later. So we weren't there when they formed the squadron. We were there shortly after. And then they moved us, for whatever reason, to Klamath Falls, Oregon. They had a naval air station there. The elevation was 5,000 feet. And when our airplanes hit the runway, they sort of bounced like a rubber ball because of the altitude. And so we went from 0 sea level to 5,000 feet altitude to train. And they had some targets out in the hills there or around Klamath Falls, Oregon, that we would use to bomb, night bombing.
Yeah.
And we were, pilot asked me one Saturday morning, said he needed to do some touch and goes. Would I go with him? I did. Of course I will. And we went to some sort of an auxiliary airstrip near Eugene, Oregon. And on about his 3rd pass, he landed short. And he didn't have enough time to get off, but I knew he didn't have enough time to get off. So we went plowing out through a man's wheat field and tore the whole bottom, of course the prop and the whole bottom out of the airplane. Nobody got hurt.
Oh.
And they sent another airplane, picked us up, and we went off from there. So when we finished there at Klamath Falls, whatever we were doing, we went to El Centro, California for some additional training. Did a lot of navigation work out of El Centro. And then they sent us to Salton Sea, California. And that was an interesting thing because they had some dirt piled up for dunes and had an airplane behind each one of them. And they had some airplanes that were rigged with a CO2 bottle, looked like a CO2 bottle on each side. And they explained to us that was going to be jet-assisted takeoff.
Okay.
And so we were going to be there, and we were going to hold, just like it was going to be a carrier takeoff, hold the brakes. We didn't have a holdback bar, but we'd hold the brakes and get full flaps, get full, turn the engine up full speed, release the brakes and pull a lever, and that jet would take off and just lift you straight up. And it would. It just go up like that. But you didn't have airspeed, so you had to nose over to get airspeed.
I didn't know they did that.
Well, there's not many people knows about that because I think we were one of the few JATO squadrons in the whole Navy, but we never used it. Our airplanes were equipped for it. Had those shackles on the side, but we never used it. We were also trained to be a night squadron. We never used that but once or twice. That's why the JATO. We could take off at night wherever we were on the deck.
Yeah.
but landing at night was interesting on the carrier because the lights were shielded, and you had to be directly behind the carrier at exactly the right altitude before you could see those lights. And if you wasn't there, you couldn't see them. And so we did that a few times, not many, but it was different landing at night like that. And the landing signal also had fluorescent paddles, so you could see those.
Well, back then, I'm sure it wasn't as visible as they can make it today, but you guys must have been really nervous.
Yeah, well, yeah, we were experimenting. That's for sure. And nobody wanted to do night carrier landings back in those days. But we left. We did some carrier simulation landing at Browns Field, California. They had a runway striped off like a carrier deck.
Yeah.
Although, of course, it didn't have the cables in it and so forth that would stop you. And so the idea was that you come around and make a carrier approach and land within a certain place on that runway, and that'd give you. And it worked pretty good. The pilots, when we went out to qualify, and on a carrier landings, we had no trouble at all. The
one on the land isn't moving.
No, on the land wasn't moving. No, but there is an advantage to the one being moving because that reduces your speed.
Okay. Yeah.
And so had no trouble landing. Some guys did. Some guys in trying to qualify just couldn't do it, and so they got put with a PBM squadron or something like that.
Did you ever have to take off or land on rough seas?
Well, yeah.
That's what scared me.
When you would leave to go on a mission, you'd probably gone around 4 hours, and the sea would change.
Yeah.
You know, it could change dramatically, and a few times we had to land in rough seas. Of course, you wouldn't take off if it were rough unless you had a real emergency. But when it's yawing and pitching at the same time, it's difficult. And a lot of them would land and, burst the wheels, burst the tires and so forth, but you got to come down.
Yeah.
Got nowhere else to go. And it was pretty rough. I've seen pictures of, planes landing and hit the barrier and break half in two and things like that, but we never had any of that. I don't think we had a deck wreck all the time I was flying off carrier.
Yeah, I don't know if those were more from planes that were shot up or...
It looked like some good, like I've seen F-6Fs, you've seen the picture a lot of times, it cut half in two and went toward the bridge.
Yeah.
But it's just where they made a rough landing and didn't catch a cable and went into the barrier. And that was interesting because those planes would break off to land about every 10 to 15 seconds. And as soon as you hit that deck, that cable, depending on which one you called, how far down the deck you went, as to how quick it would stop you. But it'd stop you pretty quick in any case. And a deckhand would run out there and release the cable from our hook, shove our hook back up into the airplane, and airplane would then taxi forward a barrier and park. Well, the next plane coming, he just had up to that barrier. If he went that far, he's going to hit that barrier and he's going to wreck him. And because if he went beyond that, he's going to tear up those airplanes already parked in front of him. So we didn't have a lot of space, but it didn't take a lot of space, for the guys that knew how to do it. I guess the guys that didn't know how to do it is impossible.
So after training, take me through where you went from there.
We flew out of San Diego and flew aboard the Makassar Strait aircraft carrier somewhere out 100 miles or so offshore. And we went to an island called Anahuac. Why, I don't know, but we anchored there. And it took a couple days to get there, and we did some flying. We're supposed to have been looking for Japanese submarines or ships or whatever it was. We'd go out, it'd be about a 4-hour flight, which is really a monotonous flight. And I had to sit there and look at the radar all the time, see if you see anything out there.
Yeah.
And we anchored there at that island called Anahuac. You might recall that that's one of the islands they used to experiment with atomic bomb.
Okay.
And I think maybe they might have sunk that island. I'm not sure it's even there today, but I'm not sure that it is or isn't. But one of the islands out there, they did sink with atomic bomb. It seemed to me like it's Anahuac. Then we went to Pearl Harbor, flew off the carrier, landed Pearl Harbor, took off from there and went to the island of Maui. And we flew there about 2 months. That was just before the Leyte Gulf battle, yeah. And although we were probably 1,000 miles from Leyte Gulf, we went out every day and looked for ships and submarines or whatever else we might find out there in support of those guys at Leyte Gulf. And when we got through with that, we went back aboard the Makassar Strait and went toward Iwo Jima, and eventually got to Iwo Jima and participated in that battle. And support of the ground troops. Basically, that's what we did. And then that took us, that was from middle of February to about the end of March. And on the first day of April, the invasion of Okinawa started. And we were in a task force. There were 7 carrier escorts, which our carrier was called, and then I think 7 or 8 of the Essex class carriers the day that the battle started there. And plus, I've never seen so many ships in my life as there was. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, aircraft carriers. Of course, laying off the coast and throwing shells upon the beach in support of that invasion. Of course, our aircraft carriers never did get that close. They were probably 100 miles offshore. We would have, we'd take 30 minutes about to get to a target. Mm-hmm. And our airplane was cruising about 225 to 250 knots. And so they could be 100 miles offshore, and we could be target in 15 minutes, or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we knew where the aircraft carrier was supposed to be.
What was your mission during those days? Heading to, you bombing the beaches, or?
Yeah, we were bombing whatever target they assigned to us.
Okay.
They apparently knew what we were supposed to be bombing because we would have different kinds of bombs aboard. It may be 100 pounds or 250 pounds or 500 pounds. But suppose, use, if you're going to bomb runways or land things on highways or things like that, you use 100-pound bombs. If you're going to bomb a building, you use a 500-pound bomb. So they apparently knew what they was going to assign us to do before we got there. I remember one day they assigned us to take out a bridge, and we had a large map of the island, and then we had smaller maps of sectors on the island. Mm-hmm. And so we were assigned to take out a bridge, and I couldn't see the bridge. I couldn't find it. And so I was talking to somebody on the radio, and I asked him, I said, can you see the bridge where it is? I said, I can't see it in this sector. He said, no. He said, I'm on battleship about 3 decks below. Below, said, I can't see anything, but I've got a map to tell you it's supposed to be there. He said, I can have a phosphorus shell put on the target. And I said, okay. So they put a phosphorus shell, and where that phosphorus shell landed over there wasn't anything, wasn't even a highway, much less a bridge. So that's the way we operated, new things.
How many aircraft would be in your squadron, I guess, or your
We had
flying with?
we had sometimes 6 and sometimes 7 of those light carriers, and we had 14 torpedo planes and 14 fighter planes on each one.
Okay.
And the larger carriers, instead of having a composite squadron like we did, made of 2 different type airplanes, they had an air group aboard, which would be 3 types of airplanes, 3 squadrons.
Yeah.
It'd be fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes. And so they would have about the same number of airplanes in each squadron as we would have in our total.
Yeah.
And so they put a lot of airplanes in the air with that many ships and that many airplanes.
That's right.
Yeah.
You said 6 or 7 light aircraft carriers,
Yeah.
and then the rest.
They'd be. I didn't see them too often, but when I did, I could see them maybe a couple, 3 miles from where we were,
Yeah.
and from the air, and it looked like they had 5 or 6 of those Essex class carriers in a task force. Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, you'd have to be there to really understand what everything going on in a big battle like that. And how many hours a day were you going back and forth to targets?
Our flights would have to end within 4 hours because that was gasoline.
Yeah.
And so we would usually be gone somewhere between 3 and 3:45. We like to have at least enough gasoline to get back aboard. And so we'd all take off at the same time. And each group though would form together. They wouldn't mass together. Like our squadron, we'd have 8 planes in the air, eight torpedo planes, 8 fighter planes. And we have 16 total planes. Well, each of them would have 16 total planes in the air. They all turned into the wind at the same time. They all launched aircraft at the same time. They all tried to take aircraft aboard at the same time at the end of the flight. So somebody was having to coordinate.
Yeah.
Who was starting to go home.
Those are the kind of things that we don't think about.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's a lot of logistics,
Yeah.
coordination with so many ships. I mean, we kind of think about it when people talk about, the D-Day invasion, but, Okinawa and other battles in the Pacific had so much to coordinate as well.
Yeah, there was a lot had to be coordinated. I don't know who did it or where they did it from, but somebody did it. I know that. I just knew that one day when we was trying to find that bridge, and the guy told me that he couldn't see it, but he had a map that said that's where it was. Of course, our intelligence work wasn't that great back then either. Even some islands out there we didn't even know existed, or we didn't have a map of them, or they weren't plotted.
There's so many.
Yeah. It's around Okinawa. There's a lot of islands. That's where the suicide planes came from, and they were really were tough out there. And we spent several days doing hunting and killing those. That's what the guys were doing on Ishigakishima. They were suicide planes coming from there, and we were over there, and we caught several of them on the ground. Destroyed them. I think some of those probably were not operational. we got I think 4 of them that came off the deck, but our fighter plane shot down before they could go anywhere. But they would know that the airplanes were gone from those carriers. They didn't have a lot of protection. They had each carrier had a destroyer, and they had, I think, 2 sets of 40 millimeter pom-pom guns, and they had the deck lined with 20 millimeter. But when you get down to the 20 millimeter, that plane's getting in pretty close. Mm-hmm. It didn't take him long to cover that distance. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So you tell me the names of your fellow crew members for your aircraft.
Elleridge was the pilot's name. They called him Chick, and I don't remember what his initials was. He went by his initials, but his fellow pilots called him Chick.
Okay. Of
course, I called him Mr. Edwards all the time. Mr. Elleridge all the time. He was, when I first got with him, he was an ensign. When we got done, he was what we called a JG, lieutenant, junior grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you fly with the same guys the whole time?
Same guys all the time. If one of the crew members was sick or something, couldn't go, somebody to fill in for them. Mm-hmm. A lot of the crew members were married. I wasn't married, so I got the privilege of filling in for more of them than some of them did, because they'd use the single person before they go to the married people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me what you did on the plane and where you're located in the plane.
Well, I was located in what we famously called the bilge.
And the aircraft is the TBF.
TBF, Avenger. Yeah, TBF Avenger. And there was a door on the starboard side just after the wing.
Yeah.
And there's a good sized compartment in there. And it had a seat that I could lift up or let down. And all the radio equipment, so-called super heterodyne, or what we know as AM, and FM, frequency modulation, we had those. We had a radar unit and a IFF unit sitting there that I could reach at any time. That IFF, identification friend or foe.
Okay.
If I'd see something on the radar, a blip, I would ask, by using that piece of equipment, I'd punch a button and ask it to identify itself. If I got an answer back, it would show up and it's friendly. If I didn't get an answer back, we're going to have to determine what that is and who it is.
Yeah.
And so I operated those things, watched that radar all the time when we were transporting, looking for something, whatever you could see out there. And then I had a 30 caliber machine gun, free spade grip 30 caliber machine gun that I would strafe with when we were after troops or tanks or something like that.
You would operate that
Yeah.
from that same position?
I'd get up and go back there, and where it was, it was behind. It was the tail wheel when it let down this way, and that gun was just back of where that tail wheel went down. Yeah, and back there, and the only direction I could shoot was kind of downward.
Okay.
And you had a ring sight and spade grip. You put your chin from your sighting eye and your spade grip. Look through that ring sight.
How often do you think you had to do that?
Oh, when we were at Iwo Jima every day. When we were at Okinawa, maybe half the time. We were generally in support of, at Okinawa, whether it was Army or Marines, I don't know. But when they were trying to take something, they would have fluorescent panels laying out in front of their, where their lines were, so we could see and operate. We'd operate on the other side of that, of course.
I
But
didn't know that.
yeah, and we would drop bombs, come over our troops, drop bombs into their troops. If the other troops were down the side of the hill, we'd come in from that direction and hit them, making sure we didn't get those bombs over the crest of that hill.
Yeah.
So if we were in a place where we're going to have an opportunity to strafe enemy troops or enemy ammunition dumps or whatever, I'd use that 30 caliber machine gun as we pulled out.
Okay. Yeah. Now you had an incident where you had to, well, you didn't intentionally ditch in the sea, but
Yeah.
it ended up that way. When was that? Was it during one of those battles, or?
Well, it was during the Okinawa battle. It was the 13th day of June, 1945. And we were returning from Okinawa, and it hadn't been a particularly tough days because they weren't shooting at us much. To digress a little bit, when they shot at us, we had somebody taking them out as soon as we could. So toward the end of the battle, they would not use their anti-aircraft gun to shoot at us because we knew we were going to take them out. They'd shoot at our troops.
Okay.
But we'd been there, and it wasn't a particularly tough day, as I said, and we were coming back. Everything was all right. We were in formation. We came back, got to the carrier. We broke up as normal. They would put the planes in an echelon. If we had two four-plane groups of torpedo planes, the torpedo planes, by the way, would land first. The fighter planes were still there to protect us until we got landed.
Okay.
And so we would come around and come downwind and then turn into final. LSO would pick us up when we turned into final down there. And so our plane came down and turned into final, and I was watching him, and we got our flaps down right, and we got our wheels down right. The wheels looked locked all right. We had the hook out, and the plane dropped below the deck line. And I could see that. I was sitting there looking at the altimeter. And so I told the pilot, I said, "You're getting low," and he said, "Yeah, I know, I'm having trouble, can't get it up." And somehow he got it up like that, and it just missed. I'm sure those wheels didn't miss that carrier more than 2 feet. So he got it up, and he got. And somehow it got turned, I don't know how. It made a 90-degree turn and came back, and I thought, oh, we're going to hit that carrier. But we missed it, and we hit right beside it. And it hit nose first. And I remember, man, that water rushed in, hit you like a brick. And I said, I got to get out of here. I remember saying to myself, I got to get out of here. Then I don't know how. We had an emergency release on that door. And somehow I pulled that emergency release. I don't remember doing that. And the door went. And I got out. And I remember.
Was that underwater?
I was underwater. Yeah, I was underwater. And I got.
Oh, one moment.
Just because we have to kind of keep going, or is it okay if we stop and come back to this, or what do you prefer?
I could probably wrap it up in just a couple minutes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Cool. Thank you. Sorry not to rush you or anything, but
Yeah.
That's all right. And so
thank you.
So we all got out, and we all were all right, and we held hands, this destroyer appeared, took us out of the water, took us aboard, shot us back over to our carrier. We went back again next day.
Wow.
They want to get you back in the air soon if you have an accident.
Just for state of mind and
Yeah, that's it.
keep you
State of mind.
occupied
Yeah.
and alert,
Yeah.
ready to go. Okay.
And
Wow. Gosh, that's
and then that's over. That's where that other airplane story comes in. You know, the one that replaced that plane we lost?
yeah, yeah.
They had a carrier out there that's what he did. He carried spare airplanes.
Okay.
And when you lost one, they flew one aboard. And then that pilot that flew it aboard gets shot back over to the destroyer, and he takes him back to his aircraft carrier. But anyway, and he brought that airplane, and we flew it. It was assigned to us on the 23rd or 24th and 26th of June, and our last flight was the 26th of June. And then that's the airplane that showed up over your Muscle Shoals 75 years later.
And
We-
you just happened to be there and see it.
Yeah, we put it off at an island called Caramaretta, they said. We flew them off there, and when we picked up a bunch of Marines and brought them back to the States because the war was over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although Japan didn't surrender, they bombed Japan. You know, after the atomic bombs, they dropped bombs on Japan. So, and this airplane dropped bombs on Japan.
It did.
Yeah, but we weren't there. We were already back in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness, that's a incredible story, and I might pick up a little bit more later, but I know he wants to
Yeah,
interview you
yeah,
too.
yeah.
So we'll pause that. So when you went into the water, well, first of all, you were lucky not to crash right
Yeah,
into
yeah,
the bow or the.
Right into the side. We were right beside the carrier. We were going this way, and the carrier was going that way.
Yeah. But even before he pulled up, you could have. You
Could have hit the deck. Yeah, it looked like the hook probably missed that deck by just inches.
Yeah, we've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
really, really close.
Yeah,
So you were lucky to survive that.
yeah, we were. Yeah.
And then you went in. Lucky that you weren't injured. You said maybe a concussion,
Yeah.
a slight concussion, but got lucky with that. And what do you attribute to you making it through when some others that you knew didn't?
Well, I think, I think that divine intervention is a part of it, because I did say a prayer when I saw what was happening. And I think maybe training is another part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know what to do in the emergency and doing it. Like knowing what doing to pull that emergency lever on that door.
Right.
Because it's not coming off if you don't pull that emergency lever that
Yeah.
takes it off. It's going the opposite direction than the airplane is. Yeah. So using your training and using your faith are important.